We're delighted to have to speak to us on this particular occasion at this hour, Brother James Baird of Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. Brother Baird now serves as Chancellor of the college and also is dedicating considerable time to teaching. I'm very sure his first love, teaching in the Bible department of Oklahoma Christian College. And as you very well know, for many years, so admirably well served that institution as president. Brother Baird has been a friend of our family for many years. I remember when the college was over in Bartlesville, and we were serving the church in Neosho, Missouri, that he used to come over and assist us on various occasions and preach for us. And through the years, we have come to love and appreciate Brother Baird so very much. Someone was just recently saying that they thought that Brother Baird was doing some of the finest work that he has done in his lifetime. He recently penned a book on the crucial issue facing us now on marriage, divorce, and remarriage, and it's a very fine treatise on that particular matter. And if you haven't seen one here at the various displays, see Brother Baird and give him your name and let him send you a copy. How much is it, James? $3.75. $3.75. And you will want to give him your name so he can mail you a copy when he gets back to Oklahoma City. You'll be glad that you did. He takes every one of the positions now being espoused and takes and gives the position accurately and then shows the weaknesses and the discrepancies and scriptural objections to the same, and then presents what we believe to be indeed the Lord's teaching on that subject. And so we're delighted with the work that he has done there and in so many other areas as well. We're happy he's with us here today to speak on the difficult text from the book of 1st and 2nd Samuel and also the book of Ruth. Brother Baird.
Wendell Winkler is about one of the best introducers I ever saw, and I want to thank him for that introduction. Raymond Kelsey and some of the rest of us work at OCC in putting lectureship programs together every year, but I'll have to confess from the standpoint of putting a lectureship program together in which there's a great deal of substance and practicality and content, why, I don't know of a finer one than this one that's being put out here, and as Brother West said, with the exception of certain speakers. In thinking about speaking at this particular time, I'm reminded of an incident that A.R. Holton told me of several years ago. He said, for some years it was the tradition at Abilene, right after lunch, to have Brother G.H.P. Showalter speak. And Brother Showalter would always read verbatim his manuscript, and he would read it in a monotone. And Brother Holton said that just it was kind of a tradition for several years there. Brethren would go in for Brother Showalter's lecture, and it would be a little time to kind of relax with the eyes closed, you know. He said one of those afternoons, sleepy afternoons, Brother Billingsley was following with very keen interest the wonderful content that Brother Showalter was making in his speech, and so right in the middle, everything was quiet and subdued. Brother Showalter was droning on. Brother Billingsley was enthusiastic, and he said, "Say on, brother!" Everybody shushing. Just came rousing out of the seat. I was asking Brother Watson a little while ago. I was saying, "Listen, I hope you'll stay awake during what I have to say." And he said he was reminded of a lady that went to the doctor, and she said, "Doctor said my husband he sleeps on all the time. He goes to sleep, and he snores." The doctor said, "Does it disturb you?" She said, "Disturb me? It disturbs the whole congregation." But I'm going to speak on these four difficulties in these two books: the levirate marriage, in the book of Ruth, and God sending an evil spirit unto Saul. How can God, good God, send an evil spirit? And what about the woman of Endor raising up Samuel, which was contrary to divine law? And how could the Bible say that David is a man after God's own heart when David is cited as being guilty of adultery and murder? And as we approach these four difficulties, we want to do it in the kind of the following unfolding. We want to cite the conflict concerning the passage. We want to focus on the context of the passage, look at the content of the passage itself, some erroneous concepts as we understand them about the passage, and then the concept which we would feel best meets the Bible presentation. Now, regarding the first of these, in what is the official genealogy of Jesus, Boaz is recorded as the great-grandfather of David and therefore the forebearer of Christ. However, when Boaz obtained Ruth, he obtained it by his own admission, according to Ruth 4:10, to raise up the name of the dead upon his inheritance. Then it's question, should not then, according to the law of levirate marriage, Obed be considered the legal son of Mahlon, Ruth's first husband, rather than the son of Boaz? That's the problem. Now, by way of a little bit of background, we know that Elimelech, Naomi, their two sons, migrated to Moab when there was a famine in Judah. And years later, Naomi returned with Ruth, her daughter-in-law. And Boaz was a kinsman of the deceased Elimelech. And he met Ruth and desired to marry her. And however, he recognized that there was another one who had a prior claim, and that to himself. And so Ruth 4:1 tells us that Boaz went up to the gate. That apparently was where business was efficiently transacted. And when the kinsman came by in the presence of 10 witnesses, there was a legal technicality that was being followed here. He recited that Naomi selleth the parcel of land which was our brother Elimelech's. This got into a land transaction. And so Boaz asked the kinsman, the nearer kinsman, to buy the property, apparently in keeping with the law of redemption of Leviticus 25:25. If thy brother be waxed poor and sell some of his possession, then shall his kinsman that is next unto him come and shall redeem that which his brother hath sold. Now the nearer kinsman agreed to buy the property. And then when Boaz told him that with the purchase of the property, there was also the obligation to marry Ruth, he backed out of the deal. He did not want to mar his inheritance. And then the agreement was officially sealed with the 10 elders and all the people witnessing that Boaz had not only purchased Elimelech's property, but Ruth as well. Now, what about the content of the passage? There's no doubt about it that Boaz announced to the elders his intent to marry Ruth so that the name of his kinsman could be perpetuated. And this was based on the law of levirate marriage of Deuteronomy 25:5 and 6. According to the provisions of this law of Deuteronomy 25:5 and 6, if a brother did not take the widow of his deceased brother, this was what the widow was to do. She was to call the elders of the city, loose the shoe from the foot of the offending man, and spit upon his face. And from that time on, the man was to be known as the house of him that hath his shoe loosed. A term, of course, of great derision. Now, here are some of the concepts that we understand are misleading about the explanation of this text. First of all, there's the explanation given that Boaz was deliberately deceiving the elders of the city, that it was never his intent to raise up kinsmen to Mahlon. But that does not fit the character of Boaz. Boaz is described by his actions as both a man of faith and a man of kindness. Another false explanation, as we understood, is that Obed was not the firstborn of the union between Boaz and Ruth, and therefore he was the legitimate heir of Boaz. However, the wording in Ruth 4:13 through 17 indicates he was the firstborn. Then there is the explanation that's given that a son could be the legal descendant of two men, but if that were true, it would violate the very purpose of the levirate marriage. We understand that the best explanation for this particular passage is that by this time, sometime after the giving of the law of Moses, two divine laws had been intermingled by custom, so that by custom, not by the law of God, that in fulfilling one, it was an obligation by custom considered to fulfill the other. The law of the levirate marriage, per se, not of the redemption of property, but of the levirate marriage, was with these conditions. The two brothers were to dwell together. The law of the redemption of property extended to other kinsmen. For the law of the levirate marriage to have applied in this particular instance, the following would had to have been true, and which were not applicable in this instance. Boaz would have to be a blood brother of Elimelech's, and the evidence, of course, doesn't support this. The two brothers would had to have dwelled together, and this was not the case. The obligation of Boaz would have been to Naomi, Elimelech's wife, rather than to Ruth. But, of course, Boaz made no effort to marry Naomi. And the near kinsman who refused to marry Ruth should have been spat upon by Naomi or Ruth, having his shoe removed. And there's no record that this was done. So in summary, we would say that Boaz was faithfully following what had grown up to be a custom among the Jews, which was not in truth a fulfillment of God's command. Now the second difficulty is, how can God send an evil spirit upon Saul. The second difficulty of this passage is, what was the nature of the evil spirit? Was it a demonic being, or was it mental disorder, or what have you? In connection with the context of this particular passage, you remember that after his sin concerning the Amalekites in 1 Samuel 15, God told Saul through Samuel, Jehovah hath rejected thee from being king over Israel. Now the passage itself makes this statement. Now the spirit of Jehovah departed from Saul, and an evil spirit from Jehovah troubled him. And Saul's servant said unto him, Behold now, an evil spirit from God troubleth thee. Probably the most erroneous general concept about this passage of Scripture is the concept that it reflects a distorted worldview. A worldview in which it was considered the reality of spiritual beings and their ability to affect man were in existence. Our materialistic worldview, as you and I well know, tends to exclude from our thinking the whole reality of spiritual presences and spiritual reality. As our understanding of the concept, which is most acceptable, we have to approach from making a distinction when we try to fathom how and in what way could God send an evil spirit upon anyone. We need to distinguish between the will of God and the power of God. We have no trouble in making that distinction with ourselves. I have the power, presumably, right now, to remove this microphone from this stand. I do not necessarily will to do it. You have the power to reach out and to pick up a songbook from the pew in front of you. You do not necessarily at this time have the will to do it. We're made in the image of God, and consequently, the will of God and the power of God are not always extended simultaneously. It follows then that God, possessing all power, can do theoretically or actually whatever he might elect to do, but he has not elected to do everything that in our wisdom we might wonder why he does not do. And as a consequence, good and evil exist in the world. Angels and hosts of wickedness exist. God has the power to destroy demonic principalities and powers, but he lets them continue. In other words, the existence of the evil spirit from Jehovah actually represents no graver problem than the existence of any evil in the world, if we accept the fact, which we do, that God is all-powerful. Since anything that happens is greater than the power of God, anything evil that happens is less than the power of God. In one sense, it could be said that whatever happens, God is responsible for it, be it good or evil. Thus, God can say, I make peace and create evil, Isaiah 45:7. When God accomplishes some purpose of his by using the evil choice of man, it is not unusual for the Bible to assign that to God. Therefore, God hardened Pharaoh's heart. Exodus 10:1. 1 Chronicles 21:1 states, "Yet Satan stood up against Israel and moved David to number Israel." Yet 2 Samuel 24:1 speaks of God as having moved David to act against the children of Israel by numbering them. We would hold then that God sent an evil spirit upon Saul in the permissive sense. It was an expression of the permissive will of God. And by it, God fulfilled his purpose of bringing David to the throne in harmony with divine plan. Now, was the evil spirit that fell upon Saul, was it a demonic being or an emotional or mental illness? Many commentaries favor the latter. Now, the Hebrew word for spirit, as we understand it, ruach, like the Greek word pneuma, is a word which is a much broader word than our word spirit. It allows to mean will, attitude, influence, and so on. It is possible to maintain that God allowed Saul to be smitten with periods of great despair and hopelessness. However, if you kind of follow the basic rule of Bible study, that let the truth of the text speak in its most literal sense wherever possible, my understanding would be that the spirit that came upon Saul was an actual spiritual being that accentuated, of course, by his own disobedience. Now, the third of these four difficulties concerns the woman of Endor and the raising of Samuel. How could a woman engaged in witchcraft, which God had condemned, be an instrument for raising up Samuel, a spokesman for God? Now, that's the primary difficulty of the passage. There are other difficulties that are associated with it. Did the woman see Samuel in bodily form, Samuel in spiritual form? Was there a demonic being masquerading as Samuel? Was the practice of raising up the spirit of the dead a practice based on reality? Did it actually occur? If it was real, did it take place by the power of God or by the power of Satan? Regarding the context of the passage, you remember that Saul represents one of the greatest examples in the Bible of the tragic decadence that takes place in human character as man disobeys God. Be it said to his credit, at one time, however, in his administration, he had taken stern measures against all of those who exercised familiar spirits according to the law of God. And however, as he prepared for the fateful battle with the Philistines, Saul desperately wanted some inkling about the outcome of that battle. And God would not speak to him through any form, and so disguising himself in the presence of two companions, he went to the woman of Endor by night. She refused his first request, citing what the measures that Saul himself had taken of punishment against those who practiced familiar spirits or raised familiar spirits. And Saul swore to her that nothing would befall her, and then Saul requested that Samuel be raised up, and it was from Samuel that he learned of his approaching defeat in battle, and of his own death. Now, it's interesting in this study, in 1 Samuel 28:11 and 12, the wording that follows. Then said the woman, Whom shall I bring up unto thee? And he said, Bring me up Samuel. And when the woman saw Samuel, she cried with a loud voice, and the woman spoke to Saul, saying, Why hast thou deceived me? For thou art Saul. The Bible reveals nothing which the woman did or said between the time she was told to bring up Samuel and his appearance. And commentaries explain this variously. Some say that it was because she did not want, it was not wanted to spread the knowledge of incantations used by mediums. Others, noting her surprise and evident fear, she cried with a loud voice, allow the view that she had done nothing when Samuel appeared. And the text certainly indicates that. Now, the concepts that we hold to be erroneous concerning this passage are as follows. First of all, that the woman really conjured up the devil who took the form of Samuel. Augustine, Luther, and a host of other ancients held this view. Again, the text indicates that it was with Samuel to whom Saul was speaking. Another view is similarly, that it was an evil spirit to whom Saul was talking, but the same objection would follow. Another false explanation, as we understand it, is that what Saul saw was a result of his diseased imagination. But a diseased imagination does not explain the literal words of the text, and it does not explain the prophetic words that came from Samuel. And a fourth false explanation is that this whole matter was just a bit of skillful fakery on the part of this medium, like our so-called mediums today. Again, we would reject this view. It's a denial of the literal intent of the language. It does not in any way explain the accuracy of the prophecy of Samuel as he spoke. The best view, as we understand it, is to take the passage and the events of the passage as literally true as stated. Samuel was in actual communication with Saul. There is no textual reason for holding Samuel's emergence came either through the woman or Satan, who had conceivably given her such power on other occasions. In the light of Deuteronomy 18:9 through 14, the power of witchcraft seems to have been a real power given by Satan. However, in this circumstance, a better understanding is that God, by his power, used this occasion to raise the spirit of Samuel from the realm of the spirits to speak a last final word to Saul. The woman's apparent surprise at the appearance of Samuel lends credence to this view. Now, our fourth conflict deals with how could David be a man after God's own heart. 1 Samuel 13:14, Samuel describes God's selection of David to Saul. Jehovah hath sought him a man after his own heart. 2 Samuel 11 describes the life of David in one of its probably its bleakest moral hours. Now, how could a man who is a man after God's own heart, how could a man described in those terms, how could he commit adultery? How could he contrive to murder? Now, the thing that adds a little bit of agony to this particular difficulty is the fact that if we read the text carefully, in 2 Samuel 11, we are impressed with the fact that this was not just some spur-of-the-moment incident. What David did shows contrivance, and it shows duplicity. He saw Bathsheba. He sent and inquired after her. He sent messengers and took her. Then he skillfully tried to cover his sin. And then he devised a stratagem by which Uriah was killed in battle. And with all criminal intent, he wrote it in detail to Joab so that he could marry Bathsheba. Now, as we focused a little bit on this black hour in David's life, let's look just for a moment or two at the setting in which these words of promise were uttered. Samuel said to Saul, "But now thy kingdom shall not continue. Jehovah hath sought him a man after his own heart, and Jehovah hath appointed him to be a prince over his people, because thou hast not kept that which Jehovah commanded thee." Now, notice the tense of the verb. God is spoken of as having already done this. He hath sought in the past tense. An action already having taken place in the heart of God. And I think the term heart is helpful to us. A man after God's own heart. We understand that the word for heart comes from a root word, labab, meaning that which is enclosed. And the term for heart itself, libab, is considered the most internal of organs, and that which is innermost, basic, central, or fundamental. We use the word heart in the identical way today. In our discussions, we frequently say, let's get to the heart of the matter. What is central to the discussion? Well, now we're talking about somebody after God's own heart. What is central to the character of God? Brother Roy Lanier expressed it beautifully last night when he described the absolute purity of God, the perfect holiness of God, God's righteousness, God's justice, and God's love. Who would be a man after God's heart? We would hold that a man after God's heart would be a man who had the spiritual sensitivity. Not that he possessed it himself 100%. Certainly he didn't. No man would. But he had the spiritual sensitivity to comprehend with extraordinary clarity what was meant by the perfect purity of God and the perfect justice of God, the perfect righteousness of God, and the perfect love of God. Some other explanations of the passage, which we don't feel quite meet all of the demands of the text, is the explanation given that this only applied to David as a ruler, in contrast to Saul as a ruler. Something certainly invites this explanation, because the words were spoken to Saul in context of his leadership. However, we feel that the relationship between David and God was something that transcended merely the rulership capacities of David. It's been suggested that these are only comparative phrases in comparison to Saul, that in comparison to Saul, David was a man after God's own heart. And there's something, of course, that would commend this. But there again, there were many people who would compare favorably with Saul, morally speaking. And yet David is uniquely described in this light. Another explanation that's given is that this was a statement applying only to the time in which it was spoken and did not encompass David's future. And there's some merit in this position. However, God continued to deal with David in a unique way even after his disobedience. We understand then that this passage is saying that although David was not a man after God's own heart in every aspect of his life, we know that he sinned. Several of his sins are enumerated. When you read the biography of David, it is a beautiful and an extraordinary biography of great faith. From the time he fought Goliath as a lad to one of the closing episodes of his life when in one of his final acts of disobedience, he had numbered the people and God gave him the option of being punished by man or punished by God. He expressed his sense of God's divine benevolence by saying, I'd rather fall into the hands of God. So David, as we understand it, was a man after God's own heart because he loved God greatly, believed in him implicitly, and even with his own shortcomings, sought to serve him with a great and obedient heart.
I was sitting there a moment ago thinking about the magnitude of information that has come our way during this series of studies thus far. About halfway through, and it's staggering to think about the content that's been presented from this pulpit. Brother Baird has certainly added measurably to the same with the content and the discussion of these texts from the books of 1st and 2nd Samuel, as well as the book of Ruth. And we are very grateful for the insight that he has given us. I'm very sure that everybody in this audience has had questions about that woman of Endor and how that all came about and these other matters, and we've been helped today from a study of these passages. We're going to dispense of the prayer and the song for the next session. We have been going over to 4:15 for the open forum, but due to the leadership dinner, we must close that down promptly this day because the leadership dinner gets underway at 5, and so the open forum begins at 4. So it's now about 3:12 or thereabout, and we're going to take about a 5-minute stretch, and then this will allow us to again get right on schedule, and we'll then have about 35 minutes, the full time for Brother Elkins' presentation, and then a few explanations about the leadership dinner, and that means that we will be in line and we'll be start serving at 5 sharp. And so, if you will, we will be coming back here in just about 5 minutes, and we will get underway with the next session. So at this time, we consider ourselves dismissed.